Hey everyone, welcome to the next tutorial in this series of Java for Beginners. In this tutorial we're going to be going over methods/functions. So you may or may not have seen the word method or functions before. You might have programmed in a different language, such as C++ or PHP. You'll know that those two languages call them functions. In Java we're going to call them methods. The two words are interchangeable and they both mean the same thing, but in Java we're going to call them methods, so we'll ignore the word functions for now. And that explanation will have made no sense to those of you who don't know what a method is yet, so I'm going to teach you what they are now. So let's take a look at the main method first of all. This main method is where Java... This main method is the starting point for Java, as I taught you earlier on, except it's probably not advisable to build a big application just in the main method, because we're going to need to access stuff from loads of different points, and there's probably going to be a lot of repetitive code, so we don't want to have to write the same thing over and over again. And the easiest way to do this is by making a method. And with a method, we give it a name, and we do something inside the method, and then all we have to do is call that name, and everything inside the method will be run. Sounds pretty useful, right? So let's go over how we declare a method. Let's come out of the main method for now. So we're still inside our class tutorial, but we're outside of the main method. Let's first look at the syntax. I'm going to make a comment. It's quite similar to the syntax for creating variables. However, we don't need to specify that we're creating a method. Just writing certain things will tell Java and imply to Java that we are creating a method. So we first need to give the method a return type. And there is stuff before this, like you can see we have the words public and static, except we're going to learn what those mean later on. So for now we're just going to learn about the return type. We need an identifier for our method, and then we can give it parameters. And parameters are a very useful thing. We're going to be learning about them later on in this tutorial. So the first thing about methods we need to know is the return type. The return type is basically the variable that the method is going to give back to the user once they call the method. So say for example we had a method called add, and we're going to give the add method two numbers. It's going to add them together. We want it to give us back the value of the numbers it added together. So in that case, say we were adding integers, the return type would be int because we give back an integer. Let's say we wanted to just do a function. We didn't want to give anything back to the user, or we didn't need to give anything back to the user. In this case, the return type is something called void. As you can see here, the return type void, it basically means that the method doesn't give anything back. It only executes the code inside the method, and then it just stops there. So let's create our first method. Our first method is going to be the return type void, because we're not going to return anything just yet. We'll be learning how to do that later on. So as you know from previous tutorials, we print stuff to the screen by writing system.out.println. Now that's quite a long thing to write, especially if we need to do it loads of times in one application. So we're going to make a method that prints out something to the screen. For now we'll just print out a set string, and then later on we're going to learn how to print out custom strings that we give the method. So we first specify the return type, which is void. We only want to print something out. We don't want to give back a variable, so the return type is void. We then write an identifier for the name. So I think a good method would be print, quite simply. And what we're actually going to do is we're going to put the word static in front of this, and you don't need to know, you can basically ignore that. The only thing you need to know about adding that is that so we can use it up here inside the main method. You'll see that if we don't put the static keyword, it won't let us use this method up here in the main method. But I didn't really want to confuse it with that, but just add that there, but you can ignore it. So after we've given the identifier, we need to give it parameters. As you can see from the main method, we have this string square brackets args. We haven't actually looked at that yet or what it does, but hopefully after this tutorial you may have a better idea of what this may do. So what we do is we write these brackets like this, we open and close brackets, and then we open and close a block like this, and I'll just make some space. So later on in this tutorial we're going to be putting stuff inside here so that we can use it within this method, but for now we're just going to do one thing, and that's write system.out.println, and then we're going to just say hello world. So when we call this method print, all it's going to do is print out hello world, and it will do that every time we call it. And I'm going to show you how to do that now, and I'm also going to explain the logic behind it. So in our main method up here, I'm simply going to write print, like so, and then I'm going to put these empty brackets, and then a semicolon. And that is called calling the method. We've written the method, we've given it the parameters, in this case is nothing, and then we've just ended the line. So when I hit run, you'll see that it prints out hello world. We can duplicate this line, and then you can see that when we hit run, you can see it prints out hello world 3 times. So let me explain more about the program flow for this. So we start at the main method always in Java. We then reach our call to the print method. So Java's going to stop here and say, right, where's the print method? We look down to where the print method is. Java says, alright, I'm going to execute the print method. It will do everything inside these 2 brackets here. In this case, we only do one thing, and that is print out hello world to the screen. And then after the last line of code in the method is done, it's going to return back to the program flow up here. So it's printed out once, and then it's going to do it again. It's going to call the print method again, do that, it's going to come back, print the hello world out again, and then it's going to finish. And it will do that however many times we decide to call it. If we just do it once, it will only do it once. So you could see that. I already showed you that. Okay. So now it's probably not useful to only print out the words hello world. We want to print out our own custom strings. We want to, when we call this print method, we want to tell Java what we want to print out. So I'm going to delete that hello world from in there. And what we're going to need to do is give this print method a parameter. And the best way to explain a parameter is to show you exactly how it works. So inside these brackets here, I'm going to write the word string and then s. And then I'm going to put the s in here. And then up here in the print method, I'm going to write hello world, like so. So now let me show you what happens. You'll see that hello world's printed out. So right, how does this work? Basically, we start at the main method, and then we come down to our print method. And Java says, right, print method needs a string as a parameter. So you need to give it a string as a... And we've done just that. We've given it this hello world string as a parameter. So now when this method is called, right here, whatever value we put in when we called it will now become equal to this value inside here, so s, string s. We then print out whatever the value of s was, and the program flow I'll show you, it goes like this. It goes hello world, the string, to the s here, and then to the code inside here. And that sort of stepping stone steps means that whatever parameter we pass in here becomes equal to this, and then we can use that however we want within the method. And the usefulness of that is if we don't know what the user wants to do inside the method, or we know the specific function but we don't know what variables we need to use, we pass in parameters to make sure that the user can have full control over it. So I'll do another quick example. Let's make an add method. So we're going to write static, but ignore the word static. This time the return type is going to be int, because we want to give back an integer variable. We then want to write an identifier for the method, so I'm going to call it add, and we're going to need to specify more than one parameter. So in this case we're going to need an integer a, and then we're going to separate them by a comma. We're going to say integer b. So we now have a method called add that takes 2 parameters, one integer called a and one integer called b. So now inside of this method here, we need to create another integer, let's say c, and we'll make it equal to a plus b. So all good so far, except we have an error and there's a missing return statement. That's because whenever you make the return type not void, you need to return a value. So we'll go to the next line, we're going to use the Java keyword return, like so, and we're going to write the variable c, like that. So what this variable is going to do is, what this method's going to do is, it's going to create a variable called c, it's going to set it equal to a plus b, where a and b are the parameters which are passed in. We then return the value of c to this method. So this add method is going to give back an integer variable. I'm now going to put this into practice, and we can remove this. We're going to make an integer called answer, and we're going to make it equal to the add method, because we can set it equal to the add method because it returns an integer, remember? We can make it equal to the add method, and we need to give it 2 parameters. I'll say 10 and 5. So what's going to happen is it's going to make a variable called answer. It's going to then say equals. Right, what do we need to make it equal to? So the add method. The add method returns an integer, so that's alright. We can set it equal to an integer variable. So we specify the parameters 10 and 5. 10 becomes equal to a, 5 becomes equal to b. We then make a variable called c and set it equal to a plus b, and we can then return the value of c. So this returned value of c is then stored in the answer over here, and we can then say system.out.println, or even better, we can use our print method, simple as that, and we can write the answer is, and then if we want to add, it doesn't have to just be strings. I remember in the last tutorial I taught you about adding strings together. Once you've written a string, it doesn't just have to be strings, you can add variables and stuff. So we can say the answer is, and then add on the value of answer. So it's going to say the answer is, print out the value of answer, which is equal to add, taking 10 and 5, which is equal to the returned value of c, which is equal to a plus b, in which case is equal to 5. So we're going to hit run, and you can see the answer is 15. So there we go. That is pretty much all you need to know at this stage about methods. Hopefully you found this tutorial useful. In the next tutorial, we're going to be making our programs even more useful by talking about if and else statements. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.